All right. What's happening, everybody, man? Thank you guys for jumping back into One Big Fire. And man, we are super excited for who's bringing their fire to the conversation today. And man, can't wait to jump in. So Al, I'll let you do the honors of introducing our One Big Fire guest today, and ready to get after it.
Yeah, Kendall, welcome to the show. And you really shouldn't need much of an introduction if you've ever been to any of the Inman conferences. You're seeing this young lady leading the way on stage, has everyone's attention. She also, as of recently, even going back more than probably 9 or 10 months to when a lot of this NAR settlement started becoming a reality. And Kendall, her background of being an attorney and then moving into real estate leadership with eXp Realty. She runs her own team out of Tampa, Florida, I believe. And she's just a true leader that isn't leading with, just a bunch of talking points. She actually studies this stuff. She's out of the box smart and really has a great perspective. What I love about you, Kendall, though, is like, and this is no cut on other attorneys, but, a lot of times attorneys speak in legal jargon that goes over a lot of people's heads. You have a way of being able to put it in layman's terms, so to speak, for the average Joe that just needs to understand it. And you do a really great job. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm honored. It's like I said before we even got started, I feel like I'm among giants, and I have so much respect for you all and what you guys bring to the industry as well, and to the various communities that you serve. And, it's in alignment with my heart and my passion, right? Is to give back to the industry, support the industry. And it's an honor to be here. So thank you for having me. And I'm very thankful too for the kind words, Albie. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a really cool event planned next week. We're going to actually get to see Kendall in person in Cleveland, Ohio at our Agent to CEO live event, which hasn't been announced yet that it's sold out, but we're sold out. The good news is if you're listening to this, feel free to DM John or myself or Jay, and we will get you an opportunity to buy the live stream. Mike Reese just launched an opportunity to live stream it. It was a last minute thing, being that and when he brought us the idea, we were close to being sold out. We weren't sold out yet, but we are now sold out. So if you didn't get a ticket, no worries. For $97, I think it is, or 90, I don't even know, 99, 97. It's a ridiculously low price. You'll be able to get this live streamed and even keep the recording of it if you can't get to Cleveland. But we are going to have an amazing time, not just in learning from Kendall. And we have our fearless leader. We call him Leo the Lion, our CEO of eXp Realty, Leo Pereira, coming into Cleveland as well. But after that, we are going to be dancing to some Gary LeVox, Rascal Flatts, Dusty Black, country music, literally right next door at Forward. It's my favorite time of the year, and I'm super excited to share that with you, Kendall. And, of course, my fearless leader, Johnny Kitchens, JK47. Let's get into this.
Let's go.
All right, Johnny, what do we got going with Kendall doesn't dip her toe in politics? Good for you, by the way. I should try doing the same thing. But we do have to talk about things that involve housing. This is a big deal involving housing. Looks like the Harris Walz campaign is proposing a housing plan that would essentially, the government would give $25,000 toward a down payment for an undocumented migrant that has moved into the country, whether they're here legally or illegal. They're going to get $25,000 each. And I have a few opinions on that.
Al's battling that good old internet connection. I'm usually the one dealing with the internet connections, by the way, Kendall. So to Al's point with that coming in, I've heard a few different takes on it. And you look at really what's happening, right? And you get down to the real root cause of why this is even being proposed. And, my take on it, it's let's buy some votes kind of play. I honestly feel it will never happen. I feel it's just throwing it out there. And that's really crazy. You know, what we're seeing in this day and age is that just blatantly throwing things out there and then running it back. And I didn't mean that, right? We didn't mean it that way. And so I think it's just, you know, throwing it out to see if it catches and being able to run with it. But the reality of it is that, you know, if my house is, you know, 475, my house just became 500. And I think that's just kind of where you're going to see just different plays on it if it ever does come to fruition, which I really don't think it will ever happen. So that's my 2 cents in perspective on all the shenanigans happening. And yeah, to Al's point, good for you staying out of the political nonsense.
Albie, I want to hear from you before I respond.
You know, I just think of like, okay, we're as realtors, problem solver. This is what we're paid to do. We're not salespeople. We're advisors. We're there to help people solve a problem. We're to get from A to B. Am I coming in?
Oh, you're cutting out on us, brother.
Darn it. All right. Well, you're going to have to hear my opinion another time, I guess, Kendall. I think the money should go to the veterans. That's my short of it. You know, like if that comes in loud and clear, that's about all I have to say. I don't know why you wouldn't allocate that money to the veterans, because they're one of the groups that are going to be hit hardest by this new settlement. So that's just my 2 cents on it.
Yeah,
I'm going to agree with you there. Kendall, what's kind of just quick of just kind of us chatting about it here, kind of where do you kind of think of, how do you think about this?
So a couple of thoughts come to mind, and Albie's right. That, you know, typically I do not participate in political conversations at all for various reasons. But let's just say superficially, let's take the politics away from it, and let's just focus on the concept or the idea, right? Of, you know, to me at its basic level, which is housing down payment assistance. Take away, you know, the I'll say political motivation behind it, right? That you all in particular are perceiving. And again, this is not for me a comment on one way or the other. But if I focus just on the idea, you know, I think that assistance for housing is important because affordability right now is a challenge, right? So the concept of finding opportunities and ways to give back to you know, the citizens of the U.S., right? Primarily, and I know you said it's not just for citizens. Again, I can't comment on, you know, the all the details of this particular proposal because I'm not as familiar with it, to be honest. But just the basic concept, I have always supported the necessity for, in certain situations, the value of down payment assistance programs, right? And down payment assistance programs are now more valuable than ever to certain communities because they can help support, you know, I know we're going to talk about later the NAR settlement and, you know, life after the 17th. But the fact is a lot of those DPA programs, they do allow for some of those funds to be used to support all of the buyer's closing costs, because now with the settlement, the buyer's closing costs just went up. Which is going to continue to challenge consumer affordability of housing, because this, regardless of what's happening with inventory right now, because we are seeing, you know, I know we're going to talk about that too. Normally, as you know, demand supply goes down, demand goes up, and vice versa, and that we typically see pricing connected to that. We're not experiencing that right now, technically, right? Like housing prices are not, we're not seeing a significant decrease or decline in home prices as a result of that. And so affordability continues to be a challenge. And in fact, you know, a lot of the economists are saying they expect a continued 3 to 5% equity increase in home values over the next 2 years. So anything we can do to help mitigate the burden, I think, on the consumer with trying to participate in the greatest American, you know, achievement, right, opportunity, you know, is owning a home. Whatever we can do to support that, to me, I support, right, just from a real estate perspective.
Kendall,
and that's taking out the motivation, the politics.
Yeah. So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
who is going to be able to take it? Say, let's just hypothetically, this goes into play, down payment assistance in some form, right? For first time home buyers.
Yeah.
Who is going to be able to take advantage of this? And is there enough product for them to be able to take advantage of, right? We're talking about inventory going up, but is what inventory is going up? And now we're in supply and demand for an actual affordable first-time home buyer product.
Right.
Is there enough product for this to be even taken advantage of?
That's a wonderful question. I think part of it comes back to our home builders, right? Building product for that market. And I think that we are seeing a mix of builders getting back into that market because, after the last housing, we'll call it depression that we had back in, 08, 09, et cetera, a lot of builders went out of business, a lot of builders left, and we got really behind and keeping up with the new building inventory, right? It's going to take them quite some time, I think, to catch up with that. And part of that reminds me of a couple of other economic concepts, right? They expected millennials to stay at home and have multi-generational households, but we're not seeing that at the rate that we thought we would. So everyone thought like, oh, families would collapse into one home. Well, we're not seeing that. Millennials are, wanting to buy their own homes, and the same with Zennials, right? And then the other thing, economic concept that we expected was the silver tsunami. That actually hasn't happened hasn't happened yet, may never happen, who knows? But that's also been
what's the silver tsunami? Explain that to me. It's a term I haven't heard.
So the silver tsunami is the generation of elders that we have that are, past retirement, downsizing, right? Or moving into senior living or so their inventory would be unlocked, right? Their homes, because I think realtor.com, and I'm going to get this exact stat incorrectly, but somewhere between 70, I think, and 73% of home sellers are also home buyers right now. And we also now know that they have more equity in their homes than ever before, right? And so there's part of that challenge is, the key to unlocking inventory is finding homes for those existing homeowners to purchase at a rate, at an interest rate, at a purchase price that makes sense for them. And so, first-time homebuyers, we were talking about that earlier, are, I think, less than 30% of the market, right? And so, to answer your question about, who's going to qualify for this product, I would say there's anywhere from, 10 to 15% of the market that actually might leverage a program like this, maybe less, because I think people are thinking differently about home ownership today. There's so much information, between everything that you can find online, agents getting out there, getting better at educating consumers, and consumers having questions and being able to Google and learn and ask AI, et cetera. They're getting more informed. And so now I think some home buyers are going to, rightly so, as they get educated, prioritize saving money, doing some of the things that financially that they would need to do in order to purchase. And if nothing else, asking questions like, how do I get to that state, right? But down payment assistance, I think, is probably not nearly as popular or well used or consumed as it could or should be. And I think that just comes from an education perspective as well. Even agents, I think, don't know enough about DPA programs as they should. So probably not enough people will get to take advantage of it, but it'll come from lack of knowledge in my experience.
I'm a fan of down payment assistance programs. My boy's mother and I purchased the first home through one of those programs in Lakewood, Ohio. And I think it was like $14,000 that we ended up getting toward our down payment assistance. And we had to pay it all back, and we did pay it all back when we eventually sold the property. And it was in a specific area. And as you were describing that, Kendall, in my mind, I believe that those areas where that money should be available should be in areas where they're not as desirable areas. These are the areas we want to bring up. We want to bring the neighborhoods up. We want to inject money, funds into those specific neighborhoods to, incentivize people. There's certain neighborhoods you don't have to incentivize people. Like I'm in Avon, Ohio. It's not necessary because there's always such high demand there anyway. I think it should be shifted to, inner city or places that we don't see people flocking to try to bring them up and inject, funds into that area. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that investing in communities is necessary if you want to see growth and improvement, right? Investments are required if we expect to see that. And so I don't disagree with you, Albie, that where those funds go when it's designed to help support, the people that, need it and want to use it to also because they also want to invest. I think that's a good thing. And, to your earlier point about the VA, I didn't want to miss this. So I absolutely agree with you on veterans needing and/or should be a priority. And in fact, with the NAR settlement, I was one of those people, along with a few others, that have said, because the VA did provide a temporary waiver on the exemption against VA borrowers paying for their agent, right? So prior to the NAR settlement, just to catch people up, the VA had this prohibition against a borrower paying any fees to their real estate professional. And so as a result of the settlement, they had to create a temporary waiver, which they did create, and it has some restrictions to it while they work on a more permanent plan. But part of that was, and what I say is, it's important that VA borrowers have two things: a voice and a choice in their representation. And by giving them the ability to, for those that can afford it, choose and pay for their representation, if it gives them an advantage in the marketplace, right? When they go to make offers and they go to buy the home that they desire to use their benefits for, that's important to have a voice and a choice, right? But one of the step further, I would say that the VA should go is they should guarantee representation by offering funds to pay for it. That to me is the best give we could, another good give or another best give that we can give back to the men and women who serve our country at such a, at the highest level, because they risk life, right? Life and limb to protect us and the nation's interest. So to me, I would love to see the VA guarantee representation through funding and paying for those services. I don't know. Let's put that out there.
Well stated. Well stated.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, obviously we don't control what happens with these laws, but we do need to get out and vote, and that's an important thing that we should remind everybody. So, Kendall, the housing inventory climbs, yet the prices aren't coming down. Typically, like you had mentioned earlier, the laws of supply and demand rarely fail us because they're a law. That if you increase the supply of any particular product that goes beyond the demand, prices will typically ease up and come down, so that just because that's just the way it works. There's more to choose from, so they're not going to have to pay as much. Now, it does happen in reverse. If we shrink that supply and there's a big demand, prices will typically go up. Yet we're still seeing this high demand for housing. We're still seeing prices increase. Maybe they're not shooting up like we've seen them in past years, but they certainly aren't coming down. What do you think the biggest drive, even in the last month? And I know we're going to get to your fun topic, which is the post-settlement review and talking about what we've seen since the 17th of August. But what do you think's causing prices to continue to increase while supply is at an all-time high in the last 4 years? We've never seen an inventory as high as we are seeing right now.
It's a great question. And before I really share my thoughts on it, one of the things I want to take us back I think it was either December of 2022. I was on a call with some of the some top brokers, leaders across the country, and we're heading into the new year, and it was a leadership event, and we were just talking about we all felt it. I mean, anyone that's been in the business, a long time, especially in the last since 2020, we all felt the end of 2022. Like we all felt the shift happen, right? Like you could, if you were paying attention, you could almost predict what was going to happen in 2023, which was a year where we sold the fewest homes, right? I think we sold around 4 million. And I think the average is over 5.
5.556. Yeah.
Yeah. In that year. And so what happened then was, and it was funny because I said on the call, I said, what happens if we see low inventory or low supply and low demand? And they were like, Kendall, don't say that. Like, don't curse us this way. Don't put that out there. But that's exactly what happened last year. We suffered from low supply and low demand, ish, because we sold the few. And I only say that because we literally only sold, we had one of the lowest years in sales. So, this year, I'm been watching, and we're seeing, like you said, inventory creep up, and it also caused me to question and ask. Remember back in the day, one of the rules, housing laws or rules of the industry was 6 months represented a neutral market. Do you guys remember this? So like 0 to 6, seller's market,
buyer's market, neutral, then buyer's market. Yeah.
right? Like I've been asking lately, has that rule changed? Has it shifted? Have we moved to a 3-month, 4-month inventory? Because we're starting to see where home sellers, if their home is on the market for 30 days, they're like, oh my God, it's a buyer's market. I'm like, whoa. That's a little dramatic, right? It's okay. 30 days is not that bad. Me coming from a short sale market where I had listings for a year, right? Before I could get them under contract.
Oh yeah.
Eventually the buyers will come. And but we're seeing homes sit a little bit longer than the 2 days, 3 days, 7 days that people became accustomed to post-COVID. And so for me, like, that's also an interesting question. Like, do you guys think like it shifted? And I wonder if that's part of the conversation about inventory and what's happening in the marketplace, right? Because still arguably in a seller's market maybe, or are we in a buyer's market and people just haven't figured it out yet?
Yeah. Mike Delpre's newsletter, whatever, popped up this morning, and it was about views through the portals, right? Through I don't know if you guys saw that, through Zillow, realtor.com, homes.com. So his point was like the amount of ad spend that homes.com has been on a tear since the Super Bowl, how it's increased the amount of people going to homes.com, but Zillow has pretty much stayed the same. But what was interesting was his year over year view of how many viewers in the portals from last year to this year. And if we're like last year, buyer demand was low, the numbers were almost identical to the amount of eyeballs in the portals this year as last year. So are we still saying then is buyer demand still low? And that's what we're starting to see, inventory to start to creep up. Our good friend Nick Good, he texted me the other day. He said, DFW has the most homes for sale than it's had in the last 20 years. And I'm like, damn. And he's like, yeah. He said, it's just kind of where things are at to, just that we're starting to see across the country.
I mean, some of the places need it, like DFW, right? Like it got so out of control that, Kendall, you were talking about affordability. It wasn't even so much affordability. It was just so much demand that it was almost a lottery. You'd have to put 10 offers in just to hopefully get one accepted. And this is coming in over asking price with waiving inspections, doing all kinds of crazy things just to secure a house. So I think when we can't compare where we are today or where we may be in 6 months to those days, because those days would be like comparing us to 08, 09 when we had 1,000 short sales out there. That's just not normal. That's just that's an extreme.
Anomaly. Yeah, they're anomalies.
It's an
I agree.
extreme. Yeah.
I think like 2019 is a good year to look at because it was kind of normal-ish. Like it was probably one of the most normal years, and market was creeping up, and compared to the 10 years before it, and probably the 5+ years after it. So I always look to 2019 to normalize my expectations. And I would say this, and I tell people too, inventory might be creeping up, but that doesn't mean it's still abnormal because we're so abnormally low for so long. I mean, like in Tampa, I did, some analysis, maybe a year or two ago, and I was looking at, okay, what does inventory look like in Tampa? And it was like, there was a time in, I think 2021, maybe 2020, 2021, I can't remember which year, where we had for sale like 2,500 to 3,000 homes, which is like, and just to put in perspective, in 2009, it was 25,000 homes compared to 2,000 to 3,000. And then I was like looking at, okay, and then now it's like 8,000 or 9,000 because it felt so much more. Again, we're like, ooh, it's so much, it's 3 times what it was 2 years ago, right? But 9,000 is still nothing compared to 25,000 or 30,000 homes, active homes on market back in 2009, right? So, I mean, even as inventory numbers creep up, we always have to compare it to the various like timelines, roles and timeline to see like, is it really, it's up, but is it high? Those are 2 different questions, right? It can be up without being high or too high, I should say.
Yeah. No, to Al's point, right? Is it just kind of the downstream effect of what we went through in 2021, like you said, 22, and the shift into 23, inventory's finally getting back into the markets to where it needs to be. And then, I think it's just, as we know, market specific, right? Being able to speak to that. And even as it starts to creep up, I mean, like, what is good product, right? The right product that's actually on the ground as well is definitely another conversation.
Yeah. So like that brings up another point or a concept I had too is, for example, in Florida, we're on the verge of a condo issue, right? If not already. And as a result of, very sadly, that condo collapse a few years back, it's thankfully, though, created some new rules or policies, laws, et cetera, for condominiums to make them safer. But it's significantly impacted the cost of condos and condo associations, which now again, condos used to be more affordable. A lot of our retirees would buy condos, and now it's coming to a place where condo association fees are so high. They're no longer an affordable option to move out of single family and into a condo. And it's become so obnoxious that some developers are buying out the entire condo, collapsing it, and they're rebuilding a brand new one, right? Which is crazy to me that, that's happening, but that's an example of things that are happening right now. And so as condos become the new depressed marketplace, I think that's also going to protect the values of single family homes because condos may no longer be an option, right? For that market.
Affordable housing market. Yeah. That's such a good point.
I wonder if, the costs keep creeping up that way. Obviously, insurance plays a big part into that. The other part of it is that if there's a major, let's just say a structural issue with the building, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars to address that. And that falls all purely right on the owners. And they're all going to get assessments. And then the question becomes, are those condos as marketable with a pile of assessments that it's going to come on because that happened here in Cleveland to a luxury apartment complex. And, it affected the values. They couldn't give some of these things away because no one wanted to take on an assessment of $60,000 on top of what they were going to pay for this luxury condominium. And so we're not seeing the effects of that in Florida. I'm just kind of, we saw it here in a specific, and it was a structural issue right on the water of Lake Erie. The developer and the builder did not, plan accordingly for the beating that the moisture and that would take to it. And then the whole side of a building had to be redone. It really sent some people into, financial hardship. They had to sell, and then they couldn't because the market softened up. We hope that doesn't happen, in Florida. Kind of going back to what you were saying, like 2009. Well, I was, while we were talking, I wanted to find out what the average interest rate was, and it was 5%. So 5% was the interest rate in 2009, and you had mentioned there was like 23,000 units for sale, in Tampa versus, the 3,000 that's here today. And when we saw that softening in 2022, 2023, I believe spring of 23 is when the interest rates nearly doubled. So everyone was on this honeymoon of cheap money.
Yeah.
3%, 2.9% fixed, just crazy cheap money. When I got licensed in 98, the interest rates were between 7 and 8%. I just figured that was normal. That was the only thing I knew. And now we got, really, this honeymoon of, just beautiful, cheap money interest rates, which was helping affordability. Now they're kind of just in a normal range, and we're seeing this affordability thing still creeping up into our markets.
Well, I think, a couple of things here, and to go back to your original question on this topic, the thing I would add to this conversation is that, just like I said, how the economists are all, because the question becomes, as inventory is rising, why are we still expecting, why are the economists still expecting equity increases, steady equity increases over the next couple of years? And I think it's because there's this strong belief that there's pent up demand waiting for current existing rates to come down to, I think the goal is to get it down into the 5, because we'll never see the 2 and the 3s probably ever again in our lifetime. But like getting back to the high 5s, maybe low 6s, mid 5s, like as soon as it gets down, I think into mid 5s, I think there's going to be, a ton of buyers that are, and really it's going to be existing home sellers coming out of the woodworks to like do their shift, their move, their upside, upgrade or downsize, and or relocating just communities, whatever they're looking for. And I really do think like the key to all of this is a simultaneous, while unlocking inventory, unlocking, demand, right? Because we've got to unlock both. And, things that I think are the future of real estate, like to help unlock that, are right now assumable mortgages, I think are a powerful opportunity to, unlock demand and unlock inventory. Because like for me, for example, I have a 2.9 interest rate on my home. I only owe about, on its value, maybe a quarter of what its value. But if I know the next home I buy is going to cost me the same, it's going to be smaller than the current home, which, is acceptable to me because I just want a smaller home at this point. But, I don't want to double my interest rate to move. But if I know the home I buy is assumable, I have a ton of equity in my existing home to apply towards that purchase. And then to assume that existing homeowner's loan that's also equivalent to my own, it's in the 2s, it's in the 3s. That's an acceptable, like lovely situation for me, right? That's a dream scenario, compared to, if I have to, purchase again and, double my mortgage payment because I've just been used to this payment for so long. I think that's a way. Another key to unlocking inventory and demand is the concept of portability as it relates to mortgages. I think that there are some mortgages out there that are interested in this concept and they're looking to explore it. So imagine if I could take my existing loan and shift it into my new property. So, because really loans are not about the challenge today isn't the property itself, it's the borrower. right? That's what the loan is based on. So if I could say, hey, I'll pay a fee, I'll pay a point, and let's move my current loan to my next property. I'll keep paying it, and then I'll pay cash on the balance. To me, that's a win. That would unlock inventory and demand, especially in the marketplace of other borrowers like myself.
Do you think that there's a specific target to whether it be like a mortgage amount target, a range, say like mortgages between, I don't know, 70 to 300,000, or would you like more focus on like FHA and try to like really help again that first time buyer that typically will often use an FHA loan as their vehicle into home ownership, or VA? VA is already assumable.
FHA is also
And FHA,
FHA and USDAs are all assumable. So there's quite a few.
So you're saying move conventional loans into the assumable market.
Say that again?
Like you're saying conventional loans in addition, and you'd like to see them open up.
So they may or may, there might be certain types of conventional loans. I'm not an assumable expert, but I do know USDA, VA, and FHA loans are assumable. And a common misnomer is you do not have to be a VA borrower to assume a VA loan.
Yeah.
You don't have to be. So there's opportunity there. And who's that addressable market for these assumables? I think the biggest majority of the marketplace for that are the existing homeowners today that we need them to move up, right? There's a significant amount of them that the only reason they're staying in their home is because of the interest rate that they're locked into that they love, right? And they just can't imagine paying more for a house and also having a higher monthly expense associated with it. So if we can like shift them into a new home, their upgrade or downsize, then that opens up that other, some of that more affordable housing that's a new first-time home buyer can now purchase into because it's the right size, right location, et cetera, for this first-time home buyer, right? So that's the opportunity there. And there might be some, because the reality is first-time home buyers aren't likely to have they don't have the equity support of an existing home to do an assumable mortgage. And I think it's less about price range for the assumables as it is about the loan to value ratio. But like, for example, the vendor I know and work with for assumables, they will help those borrowers finance the difference if necessary. So even if they don't have the equity, they can finance the difference at today's rates, but that's still a lower overall cost of acquisition to bundle it with a lower rate assumable along with an existing rate on the balance, the difference.
That's a good point, Kendall. And I think that's where agents need to, and like Al said earlier, right? We're problem solvers, and as humans, we're problem solvers, right? Sometimes we have to be more aware of it. But I think that's where the skill set as agents moving into the future, just what are all the ways? Creative financing, deal structure, so I think being able to bring that skill set into the conversation when you're working with the clients, I think is just absolutely critical moving into the future, everything that you're talking about.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. Like one of my things I've been talking about back since my brokerage days was this concept of being a one-stop shop as opposed to a one-trick pony. And I'm actually going to be building a class. I'm going to be going across campus of EXP world through all the states, like doing this training so I can help agents I see and identify like how they can become that one-stop shop. Because it really comes down to, you don't even need to be creative. You need to have knowledge. Like you just need to know certain products exist so that then you and the consumer can go get educated and then execute if it works for them, right? So like one of my really quick, my little 30-second elevator pitch on this as a listing agent, because this is where it started, but I also have one for buyers too. And it's, most agents are going to come into a listing with two options: list with me or don't list with me. I've trained my team and my agents, to come in to the listing agreement with, here, let me tell you all the ways that I can help you achieve your goal. Once I understand what your problems are, I have the solution. So for example, my solutions range from, we can list on the open market. I can do a private sale. I can get you cash offers. I can help you buy before you sell before you buy, concierge services. If you need to renovate or rehab the property in order to maximize value, I have a program for that. And I also have a transparent auction experience. The point is that there's no reason for you not to ever list with me once you are ready, because whatever your challenges are, I have a solution to help walk you through that. And that is the way that we unlock, opportunity as a company, as listing agents, to really build a business that lasts, right? So that's just an example. So I'm super excited about that. When that's built and ready to launch, I can't wait to share it. Hopefully the nation will be in.
I can't wait. That's absolute gold. And it's where, as Al knows, I mean, it's being a true expert and really being coming from a consultative approach. And we've done it on the listing side, but now, and I think this might be a good segue into post-settlement, you've also got to take the consultative approach and sit down on the buy side, just as the same. And that's when we develop, CHSA, Certified Home Selling Advisor. We develop Certified Home Buying Advisor. And anybody that's gone through it, it's the same dang thing. It's the same process. It doesn't matter. You just take that consultative approach to your point right there, is like, I can't give you a prescription if I don't know what you're trying to do. Like, what's the goal? What are you guys trying to accomplish? And as agents and true professionals, you got to do the same thing on the buy side. Like, what are your goals? How long are you going to be here? Like, are you looking at this as an investment? Is this just short term? You're going to buy, hold on to, like, what are you guys trying to do? And once I know, then to your point, I got all kinds of solutions to help you achieve that.
Absolutely.
I think, when we talk about the word expert, it was thrown around so much earlier in my career, where there truly were people that were not experts, but yet they were an expert on TV, like the actor part, right? And the truth is, more so even now than ever, you can't be an expert without actually being an expert, without actually knowing your product, your options, what all of the options are, not to serve you as the agent, but to serve your client first, and in reverse. We used to hear the term commission breath being thrown around. And that was that, some agents, not all, they were so focused on getting that commission that they were really only, signing that seller up, or advising them, I should say, on one option list. And this is it, the traditional way and what have you. So you do have to truly become expert. If not, you got to dig into your market data. You got to know your market data inside, outside, and backwards. And that should be part of your presentation. Why? Because you build authority. Why is it important to build authority? Because trust follows with that. And when you can build trust and authority, those two things, the magical thing that will happen is your client will actually listen to you when it's necessary for them to listen to you. And I know as an attorney, you probably go through the same thing. Just because you're an attorney and you have that law degree doesn't mean every single client listens to your advice every single time you give it. And I just know as an agent, when I was heavy into selling 100 homes myself per year, the ones that would listen to me, it was because I didn't have authority and get that trust factor, and you just had too much to sit on at the time or whatever it was. You take time to build authority, time to build the trust. That's when people start to listen to you, when you give them the right advice that they should take. So let's talk about this. Your favorite topic, Kendall, the post-settlement review. It was all the hype all over, between you and Leo Pareja, Inman and all the big BAM, all of the big, we would say, media outlets that agents get their news from. Some accurate, some not so accurate. We're not going to get into that discussion today, but they were all focused, primarily on two individuals. It was you and Leo, because you really did dig into this before anyone else even thought it was going to be a real deal. So you were so far ahead of the curve in educating yourselves, which gave you the opportunity to give us as EXP, not just EXP, but the entire nation, I feel, US nation, and all the different brands. We're looking at you guys as to like the beacon, the light, we were all pointing for on how we can get ourselves out of this into a new normal. So what are you seeing since we're almost a month in, not quite, 7 more days will be a month after the big date of August 17th. What have you been seeing out there?
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, I'll say this. I have been on stages talking about the litigation, not even the settlement, right? So like for almost a year and a half, 2 years now. And so you're right. I have had more time than most to really think about. I've written a white paper on it for Leo back before I received my current position, just really thinking about like, what happens next? Like, where do we go from here? And so a couple of things like I want to say before I really kind of get into what we're seeing is the two things I really want people to understand. Because right now, I think there still continues to be some confusion about how the future is going to look. And I want to try to explain why. And I think though that finally people are listening because it's here, right? Everyone kept thinking it was going to go away. First of all, it wasn't going to happen. Then it was, well, it's going to take forever to change. Then the third step was, oh, well, it'll get postponed. And none of that has happened, right? So we're here. And so the thing I like to explain to people is, and why there's confusion right now is there's two things happening. Number one, I call it the great temptation. So many leaders, even today, and agents are so tempted to keep things the way they've always been or as close to the way they've always been that they're struggling to move forward. And that's the one of the challenges, right? And then because of and the reason how that challenges or that great temptation is manifesting itself, it's manifesting itself in what I call the gap. And so here you have the NAR settlement, MLSs, state boards, local boards, and the finish line is over here. And the gap in the middle is what is up to your broker, right? And so these are policy considerations. These are, what rules and what policies the broker is going to effectuate or hold or have an opinion on between what NAR says we have to do and MLSs and the DOJ and everything else, versus, over here, the finish line, the goal, and how do we stay out of further litigation, right? How do we avoid like getting sued again and or this all becoming an additional problem. And so some of those things in the gap are, some of the challenges are concessions, right? Agents are being tempted to use concessions like commission and compensation. Do not do that, right? Like, so brokers are going to need to create policies around, how agents leverage the use of concessions because it was specifically mentioned like in one little paragraph, one little line of that 108-page agreement that probably very few in the audience have read at least once, if not more than once, like myself, right? I've read that settlement agreement a couple of times. But it's like, don't do that. Another policy consideration that is creating a lot of confusion right now across the nation is the continuation of commission sharing. And if I could take a little moment here to talk about that, because that's such a hot button issue, especially for our EXP community and a lot of the other big brokerages out there across the nation, is there's this concept of, or this question of, do we continue to commission share? And so companies like ours were really the first to go out publicly and say we would not. And I want to take a moment, if I have the grace of my host here, to do that, to talk about why did EXP take this position and, why this is a good thing. So a couple things I want to say here. Number one, the reason why Leo and Holly and the brokerage decided to take a position against commission sharing is for a couple of really solid reasons. The first one is the mechanism that was utilized to protect the institution or the concept of commission sharing, the protections, the agreements, the enforcement is now gone, i.e., it was because of the MLS, right? We signed agreements when we joined the MLS. that protected this idea of commission sharing. And how it worked was there was this requirement in the MLS. There's two requirements. Number one, or really one requirement, that if you entered your listing into the MLS, so if a seller decided to participate in putting their home in the MLS, they were required to offer some sort of compensation to the buyer agent, right? And this policy and this process goes back, a couple of decades, right? And protection of buyers and making sure they had representation. And so with that mechanism, so now with these new rule changes, right? Because these aren't laws, these are rules and policies of NAR that we as NAR dues paying member have agreed to accept. The new policy is not only did they take away that rule, it's actually now prohibited. So we no longer can leverage the mechanism or the apparatus of the MLS to advertise and share commission, because it was physically through the MLS that if you wrote an offer, you were basically guaranteed that unilateral offer of compensation as a result of that home being in the MLS. And so now that rule's gone away. So the entire mechanism for protecting commission sharing has gone away. The second problem with it is that it continues to create risk, because the DOJ has been very clear that they would like to see that entire system and process go away, right? And so because of that, if you think about it, commission sharing is the continuation and the perpetuation of the unilateral offer of compensation, which is what the rule was in the MLS. So the fact that we just went through a whole lawsuit about that, we should stop doing it, right? I mean, this is just evidence. And so it increases the company's risk. Any brokerage out there, it increases their risk to continue to perpetuate this practice, and it's no longer necessary, right? So why keep doing the risk if it's not necessary?
I just want to interject, because you're hitting on something that's happening here in my local market, specifically in the Northeast Ohio, Cleveland area market. There's a company that will remain nameless, but they're a very large company, and they came up with the concept of actually advertising their commission offering for every one of their listings on their IDX site, which would require them to actually physically put it on there by their programmers on their dime, because it's illegal and you can't. Well, there are no commission offerings in the MLS, and the IDX feed comes from the MLS onto a public facing IDX site. So they have to go back on there and put that amount on there so that the public can then see it, which is now causing a whole nother problem. Meaning, for me as a buyer's agent, if I was working for a buyer wanting to sell one of their listings, you best believe I'm going to be on there looking and seeing, and there's all different commissions listed on there. You can go onto their site and anywhere from $1 to 3%, 5.5%, whatever it is. It's just this whole range. There's nothing consistent. So if I'm a buyer's agent and I want to leg up on the negotiation, I know what my agreement is with my buyer. And now I know what the offering is. And it actually is in my opinion, it's putting their sellers at a disadvantage. And it's also causing a lot of problems within the marketplace, because what you just described earlier when you were starting to talk about the settlement was that there's people clinging on to the old way.
Yeah. And
then there's the ones that are moving forward and saying, we're going to do business this way, the way that they want us to do it to stay out of litigation. I think that's, if I were to point at one thing, it would be probably the number one issue, at least in Northeast Ohio. I don't know if it's happening in Florida or anywhere else, but there's literally seems to be, and you nailed it too. The problem starts with the broker, their interpretation of the settlement. And that Inman interview that was done with the plaintiff's attorney, I won't mention his name. We don't want to mention his name. He doesn't deserve any mentioning of names, but we know who we're talking about. He literally stated in the interview, I'm not going to help anyone interpret anything. I'm just going to be over here watching and seeing if someone screws up, and we'll be there to pounce on him with another suit. He literally said that in the interview. He's not, at least I give him this, he's not hiding his intent.
No.
He's left it up for us to interpret, meaning the brokers. And it's each individual broker is going to interpret that based upon what their legal counsel is probably telling them. And then the question becomes, how much risk do you want to go? Like, how much are you willing to inch toward the edge? You know, like ding, 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 ding. How far are you willing to go, or how far are you not willing to go? What would you say? What are you seeing? Because you're seeing this in all different markets. I'm kind of just speaking about my market.
Yeah. So a couple of different things. So one, I have a friend in California. She started implementing the change to prior to her state or her local MLS implementing the rules, right? Because the MLSs are the enforcement and kind of helped us move along, like with when we implemented this change. And she noticed two important things. Number one, because she's a top listing agent, when she stopped promoting or advertising compensation to the buyer's agent, she found that all of the agents that won their offer, their comp was actually that they requested and got paid was higher than her customer normally would have paid, because she has an institutional seller, right? So that was really interesting. So all of those agents that made their offer and wrote in their comp for as agreed to with their buyer actually got a raise from what she normally would offer. That's powerful insight. The second thing she noticed that she was tracking was the fact that those same agents, that all the agents that won offers, not one of them called her ahead of time to ask what the seller was offering. They just wrote it in their offer. They just made the offer and wrote it in there. And the seller accepted it. And, they negotiated on all the other terms and it moved forward. So those are two really important lessons I think that agents need to walk away with. Number one, it is not practical or does it make any sense for you to call every seller or listing agent before you show their property to find out if they're offering comp? It's irrelevant. It's not necessary.
It's actually unethical.
Yeah. Yes, it's ethical. It can be
ethical. Because are you determining you're going to show the property what the comp is? You shouldn't be.
Wait, so say that again. I didn't hear the question.
So yeah, I was saying, from an unethical standpoint, asking what the commission is, are you going to show it or not? And come back, compensation drives behavior. We know that shouldn't happen. However, we know it does happen. And so, yeah,
it's arguably steering, right? Like, or at least the current definition of the new the new definition of steering, which always frustrates me because it actually has a real legal definition that has nothing to do with compensation. But yeah, so again, they are looking and paying attention to see, are we again clinging to and tempted to do things the way we did them in the past and not adjusting to the new way. And so with that, I don't think you need to call the agents ahead of time. Just write it in your offer. And the other thing is you write the offer according to what the buyer needs, right? Mm-hmm. So some buyers are going to instruct you, and you need to educate a buyer the power they now have in writing offers and the voice and the choice that they get to make, right? As a part of this, because there's a number of places to negotiate, right? You've got purchase price, escrow, contingencies, deadlines, commission, concessions. These are all areas that a buyer now has they're empowered. They have the agency in their agreements to negotiate. And so they can leverage these levers in various ways. Maybe purchase price is important. Maybe they need a pre-occupancy. Maybe the seller needs a post-occupancy. These are all things that now you can put all this together to make a great, strong offer. And if you're going to call a listing agent, it should be to ask, how can I write the best offer possible for the term that your seller's looking for, so I can give some feedback to my buyer on that? It should not be about your compensation. There's so many resources out there to help pay for, including some down payment assistance programs. And also too, I think we've got to shift our mindset from thinking that buyers, won't pay or can't afford to. Maybe you just have to negotiate a fee and a service where it's allowed, right? Because some states allow menu of services, some don't, but like that makes sense for that customer, right? But make it about them and how you can serve them and less about yourself. And no one expects agents to work for free. I think even buyers. I don't think buyers expect you to work for free either, or sellers for that matter.
It's a great point, Kendall. And I wanted to, before we wrap up here, and I appreciate we're going over a little bit on time, but I'm glad you didn't have a hard stop. So because this is just a fantastic conversation with things that agents need to hear this. They need to know this because it's not being talked about in their, unless if you're not an EXP agent, maybe, but if you're an EXP agent, you're hearing this from your broker teams because they're constantly educating. I've seen it firsthand here, but I wanted to circle back to something you said earlier at the beginning about not using, and I may have misunderstood you, but not using a seller concession to offset the cost of a buyer's broker fee. I was under the impression after watching a lot of, yours, Leo's, that was one of the two ways that we did think that it was okay, as far as a good, safe practice, meaning, seller concessions to buyers' closing costs have been going on since probably before I had my license, but for sure 08, 09, it was a common practice to ask for 3-6% in concessions. Now that went all toward their closing costs, which included lender costs. And now that the buyer's the buyer's broker commission is part of the buyer's closing costs, according to the buyer broker agreement, wouldn't it be just easier to say, seller to contribute 3% toward buyer's closing costs, prepaids, and call it a day, because that, the commission's part of it. It's not all of it. They have other closing costs. They have lender fees. They have a filing fee. They have other, escrow fees.
Yeah.
For title, legal fee. But why not just lump it all in? Because it's part, it went from one side, the seller side of the HUD, to the other side of the closing statement. Why not use that as a technique? Or did I misunderstand what you were trying to describe?
I will say that, so I won't say you misunderstood, but let me give clarity to what I said. Because if you thought that way, someone else listening. So what I was referring to is listing agents should not market concessions as a replacement for commission.
I see.
Right? As a loophole or
yes, I misunderstood you. Our MLS it won't allow it.
Yeah, do not leverage concessions to market to a buyer's agent the way you would have compensation, right? That's what I was referring to. But to your example, Albie, absolutely. But my thing would be to this. Let me give you some examples. It's an agent's job to advise the buyer and the buyer to make the decisions, right? So, our actions are dictated by the customer's decisions. And so this is why we need to educate them. So for example, one buyer could ask their agent to write an offer that asks for no concessions, no compensation. Another buyer could direct their agent to write an offer that asks for whatever their commission is or compensation fee is to have that paid by the seller. And then a third buyer could ask their agent to say, hey, not only do I need your compensation paid, but I also need additional concessions amount. So because to your point, Albie, my closing costs just went up as a buyer, right? So every agent should stop having in their mind how it has to be done and be focused on what does the client need me to do, right? Like, instead of focusing on how do I get paid, what does the client need? The client's already agreed to pay me. We've agreed on the value of my services. What does the customer need in terms of from the seller? How do I write the best offer possible that meets the needs of the buyer and, addresses the concerns of the seller? And so sometimes that is going to be asking for, one amount, nothing, one amount, or even a higher amount. And so it is our job to make sure that the customer knows that they can do that if that's the offer they need written, and that we will, write it up according to their instructions. And so, and concessions are I shouldn't say great, but they are a way for a seller to compensate a buyer, right? Or to give a concession to a buyer. And then that allows that buyer to pay their broker, right? Their buyer broker as a part of all of the fees associated with the cost of acquisition.
That makes sense. Thanks for clearing that up. I did misunderstand that. And so I may not have been listening intently enough as I should, but that cleared it all up. That's amazing. Thank you so much. And I can't wait. Again, I can't wait to see you in it's 1 week from tonight.
Yeah.
You're gonna be flying into the land. I know JK here is pumped. We're also excited. We sold Agent to CEO out, and now we're actually live streaming it for folks that didn't get in on time. So we have that. I'm going to be actually launching that. I haven't even launched the offer yet, but you will be starting to see that. So if you can't get into Cleveland to see the wonderful Kendall Bonner and Leo and John Kitchens and Jay Kitchens, Jay Kinder, and we actually have Michael Reese. We have all the boys under one roof for the first time in I don't know how many years. So I'm really excited about
Oh, no.
We lost him.
Oh.
We lost him. So
well, so for me, my coming, I'll wrap it up, John.
yeah. So what Al was trying to say is that look for the live stream option coming out everybody's way as we have sold out Cleveland Agent to CEO, and look forward to seeing you, Kendall, and seeing everybody else there. And we'll have to run this back because I've got a ton of questions that we didn't even get to. So we'll definitely be able to come back and dive to it and back into it in the future. So Kendall, thank you. Thanks, guys. We'll see you guys on the next episode. See ya.